When I was in my late 20s, early 30s, Gary and I wanted children very much. We were trying very hard to have them, but every time I got pregnant, the pregnancy ended in miscarriage. I became very depressed. How did God get me through it? Well, I was in a Bible study of very supportive women, and my Christian family supported me very much, and I read inspirational books that helped. I also, of course, did a lot of praying. Now it's pretty obvious how God worked it out and how well He did. 2 babies were born in Albuquerque that needed a Christian home, and now those 2 babies are adults and rearing their own children in the Lord. So God worked it out very, very well. And I think what I learned from that is that I need to trust Him at all times.
Alright, my name's Nathan Dimmick. I'm Sydney's brother. Some of the low points in my life and some of the places that God has showed up in my life is just when I was in prison. You know, everybody thinks it's a bad time. It is a bad time, and it's more of a time to reflect on yourself. And, you know, me going to jail was definitely one of the hardest things I've had to do. But just coming out of it and going through it, looking towards God and knowing that He was going to be there in the end of the tunnel was probably one of the best things that I did when I was in prison. The Lord helped me notice some things that I had struggled with when I was out, and kind of helped me notice some things that may have been troubling my family. It helped them to be able to tell me what I had been struggling with, you know. One of the biggest things is just my respect for people before wasn't very well managed. I was kind of a disrespectful person, had no respect or responsibility for the way my actions had made people feel. And God has shown me that no matter what, if you believe in Him and if you give Him faith, He can always switch things around. You know, because at first they were talking about sending me for 4 years, and then they talked it down to 1.5 years. So God definitely blessed me with some time to be able to sit down and notice these things, but also didn't put me to a point to where I was missing most of my life and most of my family. You know, I missed some pretty big points, and when I was in prison, I missed my grandfather's passing, you know, and God was there for me then, kind of kept telling me, hey, look, He's with me, don't worry about it, don't stress about it, everything's gonna be okay. And then I had my great-grandmother, she passed away when I was in. You know, that was really hard for me, because I always wanted her to know the real me, you know, and God told me, you know, she knows she's here, because I have prayed to Him a couple times when I was in, and, you know, I feel like I got a response like, hey, she knows that you love her, she knows that you mean well, she knows that you plan to do well. And that's where really most of my change has came from, is my family and wanting to prove them right.
My testimony is 4 years ago, I fell and injured myself pretty seriously. That I don't remember what happened. I am told by most people around me, including my husband, that I was in really bad shape. He had to call the ambulance, The EMT, which I'm friends with, she told me that I crashed, coded on the ambulance ride down from our home in the Jemez Mountains on the way down to Rio Rancho, and all I know is that at some point I remember getting very cold, very noisy, very loud noises, lots of pain at some point during all of this, and then suddenly it got very quiet, lots of soft colors, warm, and I was being held, and the pain went away. And then a voice told me it was not my time. And suddenly I went, and my EMT friend told me that was how I sounded when they jump-started my heart. And I then took a deep breath and everything started again. I'm a firm believer that was God holding me. He took my pain away for a brief moment. It happened again exactly the same way when I was flown from Rio Rancho to University Hospital, because the notes that we have say that I once again coded on the helicopter, and I do remember the sensation. I know that God did that. He also held me other times when the pain was so incredibly bad, when they took out the staples, when headaches attacked me. He's there. He's done so much for me. He's in my life.
So there have been a couple of times throughout my life that God has really shown up for me in the valleys, and I didn't recognize them probably right at the time, but I definitely see them now. One was when my parents separated and my mother and I moved down to Oklahoma, and that really, threw a wrench in my entire life, and what plans I thought I had then. And because of that, I was going to be going to Oklahoma Christian, but figured that was a little too close to my mom. So I ended up going to OVU, which is where I met Jared and got the degree that helped lead us, not lead us out here, but allows me to start working at the lab. I was going to do elementary education, but because of those things that happened with my family that were devastating and still are to an extent, I've been able to go down this whole other path I never even thought I would be on because of God. Another one is I'm kind of in the middle of it right now. As some of you know, my grandmother passed away last Saturday. She was really a mom to me in a lot of ways, more than my mom was. I was very close with her growing up. They lived about an hour south of where I grew up in Kansas, and so I was able to spend a lot of time with them, and they came up to everything. And she died of complications of dementia and Alzheimer's. Her body was just old, but the past 13 years her mind has been going. So I haven't been able to really talk to her in full sentences really the past 6 years or so. And we're constantly asking, well, God, why did you do this and everything, but now that she's gone, she's the most godly person I have ever known in my life, and I want to be like her in every way. And I've gone to many funerals and had many relatives that die that, maybe kind of like, well, I don't know where they stood with God and everything, but there is no doubt in my mind as to where she is, and I know her mind and her body is restored, and she's with her family, and that has brought a lot of peace to me during this time, and I'm still missing her, and I'm going to always miss her, but because of her faith in God and everything, I know where she's at, and I know I'll see her again. And because of her faith, my grandfather was baptized and became a Christian, and they led their 4 children into being Christians, and then their grandchildren were then, brought up in Christ because of that. And so because of her, so many other people have become followers of Christ. Another thing that has been happening is Jared and I experienced a miscarriage. When I was in high school, I was diagnosed with PCOS, which is actually very common, but it can lead to infertility issues and stuff like that, and make it higher chance of miscarriage in women. And I've always known this, but it really, I've always had felt like a deep connection with Hannah in the Bible, who went on for such a long time without being able to have a child, and prayed and prayed and prayed to God, and she was eventually able to have Samuel, and it was Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
He was able, to go on and then lead a lot more people in the tribes and everything like that. And so right now it's still very fresh and raw, because it's just happened very recently, and but I know that through this pain, it's drawing me closer to God, and I know that everything is in His timing. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, because it does. It doesn't mean that I'm not angry and questioning why, because I think all those things have to pertain to faith. But because of that, I'm getting a better relationship with my father, and I know that better things are to come. Maybe we'll just have to adopt. Maybe we'll have a kid a few years down the line. But things are going to get better, because I have faith that they will, and I know my God is going to give us exactly what I need and what we need as a couple.
This is my video of when I believe God has helped me through valleys. He's been there many times, whether it's a moment of finances in the military or other issues. But the most evident He has been the last 4 years. And this coming May will be the 4th anniversary of when Kay suffered a traumatic brain injury from falling through an open stairwell and hitting her head. From the moment I found her until we got her to the hospital, until they started treatment, I have felt peace. Not easy, but peace. There's not a need that wasn't met. Although some of the needs that were met weren't answered in the way we would have liked, we of course have been praying for her to be healed. And she's been healed more than what the doctors led us to believe. There was a time when they were telling us that she wouldn't walk without assistance or do other things. And she's now quite capable. There are still some limitations, and we've come to realize that she will probably not be fully healed until she's in heaven. But through the entire time, I have not felt alone. I have had a peace that I didn't know I possessed, because I tend to be a very controlling individual, and still am. And Kay will attest that even through this last 4 years, I have hovered too much, but I still have had a sense of peace that I haven't known before. Whether it was needing a specialist that we were told we couldn't get, who suddenly became available, or whether the $30,000 helicopter life flight wasn't covered by insurance, and then it was covered by insurance because some young lady in the office of the helicopter company said, well, that's not right, and took it upon herself to do a few things and fixed it. This last 4 years has been a story of that. So I know God's there. I know that He has been helping us. And I have just been praying that I will be accepting of what His will is, and not continually pushed to have my answers granted.
Hello. A question that was asked me: when did God show up in my darkest hour? God came to me in the darkest hour in a form of handcuffs and badges. Late 2014, most of early 2015, I had fallen into some deep sin. I was lying to myself, lying to my family, lying to my wife, and I started stealing. God showed up on May the 12th of 2015 in the form of, like I said, handcuffs and badges when I was taken into custody for my sins. Though I was facing many years in prison, God redeemed me. God stepped in and He worked through the truth that I spoke that day when I was taken into custody. Work with the people who knew me and knew that I was out of character, and saved me. He showed up in the form of the law coming down and, knocking on my door and making me change the direction that I was headed. Without that day happening, though it was shameful, though it was painful, it was necessary. And without God showing up, things could have been a whole lot worse. So God does show up in a form of, sometimes that it may appear as punishment or backtrack, but without that day happening, no more lies, no more stealing, and I'm put back on the path to righteousness with God. Thank you.
So, some of you were here back in '95 when Tracy was in an accident at the lab. Can you believe it's been 25 years? They took him to the Los Alamos Medical Center first. His neck and his jaw were both broken. When they got him stabilized, they let me go in for literally about a minute. His face was covered in these tiny little blue spots all over. They said that was because he had been deprived of oxygen for several minutes. He looked awful. His eyes were open, but he was not responsive.
I'm sure that his body was still in shock. They transported him by ambulance to the hospital in Santa Fe. Lina, Tracy's mom, and I drove to the hospital. Shortly thereafter, the elders at the time joined us in the emergency room, and they prayed with us. I appreciated that so much. Now, keep in mind for this next part, in general, I'm not a rule breaker. However, later, while sitting there in the waiting room, I was suddenly compelled to go into the actual emergency room area. I wasn't supposed to be there, but nevertheless, I went in and I walked directly to the room where he was, even though I had no idea where he was. There was a curtain there, and I looked in. Tracy was lying there, and the doctor was asking him to move different parts of his body. And the doctor asked him to wiggle his big toe, and he did. And all of a sudden, a total peace came over me. And I knew that he was going to be all right. After 2 surgeries and 7 weeks in the hospital and rehab, he was able to come home in a halo brace. Later, after the halo brace was removed and Tracy had mostly recovered, he had one last appointment with the surgeon who had done his neck surgery. Before they started the appointment, the surgeon asked him to stand up and walk around the room. Tracy was a little puzzled, but he went ahead and did it. And then the surgeon said, "I can't believe that you are walking." So, there's your proof. God still does miracles. With several miracles and some assurance from the Spirit, that is how He helped us through the most challenging time in our lives.